العوافي everyone, and welcome to another episode of تمشى مع براين. واليوم, and I think everyone can hear this, التمشية is in the city of Sydney, specifically right next to the town hall station. And I think since اليوم عم نعمل change للlocation, that it's only appropriate that we talk about that location. So حديثنا اليوم حيكون عن the city of Sydney. And as you can hear, الأصوات والenvironment اليوم غير كليا عن المتعودين عليه. بس hopefully that will bring in the vibe with the sirens as well. But anywho, so أنا like I said before, صار لي 5 سنين هون بأستراليا, and I visit the city often. All of my work has been in the city. My first job was in Martin Place Square, and now my current job is next to King's Cross, which is also close to the city and within the city of Sydney. So I've fully experienced sort of the city, and especially when it comes to how it goes in terms of the work life. And to be honest, like, I think it's a beautiful city. I really love the city of Sydney for everything. Even the bells right now just give it its character. The stranded musicians all on the side. And I like it. I like walking through this city. Now I know a lot of people, whenever you say Sydney, the first thing they would think about would be the Sydney Opera House or maybe the Harbour Bridge, which are two of their icons. But I think Sydney City itself is more than just that. Like, what I like about the city is that it's a mix between heritage and old architecture and new architecture. So you have areas like the Queen Victoria building, which is one building, which is old heritage, and right next to it you have high rises going up. And they seem to have been able to kind of get a good balance with preserving the important parts of their heritage here in Sydney, which is very nice. And you also see it in certain areas. Like, for example, in Sydney, you've got areas which are mainly heritage. For example, an area called The Rocks, which is next to the water. You can see a lot of old building, old residences, old townhouses there, just heritage stuff that's been kept through. And then not too far from it is Barangaroo, which is a new kind of pier restaurant area, and it's nice to be able to see both and see how both interact together in one city. And there, as an architect and working in the field, I know that the heritage laws here are very strict. They make sure to maintain the essence and the heritage that was there. So, which is a good thing, especially in a city like this. But also, one of the things that I really love about Sydney itself is, for example, right now what happened was I got off at Town Hall Station, and now I'm just going for a walk through the city. And not only is it very pedestrian friendly in terms of how it is laid out, but the important streets don't have a lot of cars on them. So traffic is diverted in some way from the populous streets where you have all the stores, and you have they're replaced by means of public transportation, which is also such a nice thing about Sydney and Australia in general, is that public transportation is available in a lot of means, and it makes it so much easier not only to get to the city, but to get to any point in the city, because in the city itself, and it's not very far, within short distances you have four stations, which is always a nice thing to have in a city. But yeah, like I was saying, it's just the fact that it's so pedestrian friendly. A lot of businesses, a lot of work happens here, a lot of offices. So crowds of people just constantly taking to the streets, and it works and it caters for that, which is important, especially in a city. And so, like you can hear around me, you can hear the traffic, the people, the the people playing music. It's just, especially during the day, Sydney City is one of the beautiful cities that I really enjoy walking through. And not only that, the city itself is very bike friendly. So there's this thing that I usually do since I work in the city, and it helps me kind of traverse to where I want to get in the city faster. And what I do is there's renting bikes, so you can rent it using your phone for like an hour or half an hour, and you can just ride them around the city. And that's what I do. I usually, if I'm in my office and I need to get somewhere, I just jump on one of these bikes, rent it for like 10 minutes, go and come back, and it's the city caters for that. So that's also something that's very important, because you need to allow for the people. Like, also one of the things that helps with this as well is that most of the roads in the city are one way. So rather than having two opposite lanes of cars in one road, they have it one way with parking on both sides usually. But this one way, it's a pain in the ass for the driver, because if you miss a turn, you're gonna have to like go for 3 blocks and then come back. But I think in some way it regulates the traffic inside the city. But also, I think because, well, genuinely, it's going to be slow. So it kind of pushes people to, unless you really need the car and you really need to get it into the station because, into the city because you're picking up something, or you've got a wedding or something like that where you don't want to walk around, they encourage public transport. And it's so helpful. And I think the fact that Sydney City itself has so many stations inside allows for a lot of businesses, a lot of people to use public transport to come to their work rather than use their cars, which I know is a common thing in a lot of cities, but it's also something that is always a plus, and it's a very big plus for Sydney City itself. But also, like I said, Sydney City is just, it's a beautiful to walk through. Like right now, I'm standing behind something called the Center Point Tower, or the I Tower, Tower I maybe, building, which is quite nice. The scale is very tall compared to you standing on the street, but it's also very nice. And you just feel like it's got something to it. And I think, like I said, the biggest appeal is the contrast that usually happens between old heritage buildings that have been renovated. For example, I'm looking at one right now which has been fitted out and renovated for like a major chain store. So it's always nice and refreshing. But also, one of the things that I kind of really like about Sydney City is that it has public transport to come in via train or light trail or anything like that. But also, Sydney City has the advantage and the ability to have public transport that isn't on land. So, because it's connected to the water via the two kind of wharfs, so the two kind of places where you can use public transport in the water from Sydney City would be maybe Darling Harbour and Circular Quay. And having those two connections allows you to, from the city and to the city, get much easier. So it's very common, and I see it a lot at work, where my friend usually goes like, "Oh, I come to work using public transport, but I get on the ferry." Like for example, someone that's living in North Sydney or the opposite side, for them it's way easier to just grab a ferry. And that itself is also a very important pipeline of transportation into the city, which is what makes it also nice. Like the fact that you can get on the harbor or Circular Quay and just get on a ferry and go to somewhere across the water. And even I think maybe Sydney's biggest zoo, which is called Taronga Zoo, you access it via ferry from Circular Quay, which is in the city. So it's good that it has those two wharves that are found there, that they've got a lot of restaurants around them, boats, like zones for people to be able to spend time. And Circular Quay itself is connected. So from Circular Quay, you can go to the Opera House because it's a short walk. And then also from there, you can see the Harbour Bridge. So it's a very important kind of landmark in Sydney itself. And it's beautiful up there, like especially if it's a sunset and you're witnessing that with the Harbour Bridge and the Sydney Opera House in the same background. It's very nice. And also, just a fun fact, so Circular Quay, when you hear it, you think key is spelled Key, but the reality, it's spelled Quay. So, me being me, I had to find out why. And so it turns out that Quay is translated in French to mean harbor or pier, I think, something like that. So I think it was a French translation, but I think they say it in a different way. And here in Australia, they changed it so that it's Circular Quay. Meanwhile, it's still being spelled Quay. So there's a little bit of knowledge for you. It won't help you with anything, but it's good to know. But I think one of the things that Hala, I think you guys might be noticing right now, is that it's kind of quieted down from the hustle and bustle. And that's also one of the things that I really like about Sydney City as well, is that it has dedicated or provided genuine kind of outbreak spaces, which are spaces where you can escape the hustle and bustle of the city without having to drive for a long period. And those usually come in the form of parks, like for example, New York has Central Park, and then Sydney has two. There's one which is called Hyde Park, which is the one I'm in right now. It's got the fountain in there, and then it's just a colonnade of trees, which is nice. It blocks the sound, it blocks the noise, it blocks the kind of hustle and bustle of the city, like I said. But the other important one is the Royal Botanical Garden, which is close by as well. And that one is truly an escape. You feel like you've stepped out of the city. And I think it's important to have spaces like these because they give respite to the residents of the city. You see a lot of people there that are running, that are on a picnic, that are just enjoying their day, and it's like it completely disconnects, and it's a very big plot of land. And it constantly reminds me of Beirut and how Beirut has these kinds of spaces, but in a very small scale. Like you walk in Ashrafi, you always find a random park here and a random thing there, but you never see like genuinely one that's embraced and kind of opened up for the people to be able to go and spend their time there. Not as much or as the scale of Sydney, because you need that scale. You need to be able to kind of isolate the city just so that you can calm down, relax, and not be in that. Because any city, Sydney, like any other city, is always active, even during the night. So, and sometimes it's good to get a respite from that. And that's why there's Hyde Park and the Royal Botanical Garden, which, like I said, just really give you a breath of fresh air. You see people riding their bikes. I usually, whenever I rent one of those bikes and I'm going somewhere, I usually pick a route where it passes through Hyde Park or the Royal Botanical Gardens, because it's a nice break and plus it's filled with greenery, lots of trees. So it's always nice to go for a like an eventful day or a busy day at work, and then take a break by jumping into one of these green spaces. But from this is kind of more or less me talking about preferences of me as Brian, but even on a scale of what I've studied, which is architecture, Sydney City is quite beautiful. Now, one of the things is that Sydney City itself is not, I wouldn't say dominant, but it has a very strong brutalist presence. And for anyone who doesn't know, brutalism in a nutshell is basically when you build a building and you don't paint it. So you let, okay, imagine you did concrete, you did a concrete building. Some people do a concrete building and then they paint over it. Imagine you're just doing it, building using the materials, and then keeping the materials the color that they are. That's the simplest way I can put it. But it's very dominantly present here in Sydney, in a lot of places, like the UTS Tower, which is a university tower. So UTS stands for the University of Technology of Sydney, and also, there's in the rocks. There's a brutalist project called Serious Apartments. So they're very nice projects, and obviously you need to have kind of a. I like brutalist architecture. So one day when I was in one of the art museums here, I was going to the gift shop, and then inside I found a map, which is basically just highlighting all the brutalist buildings in Sydney. And so I bought that map. I think I've gone through maybe 90% or 80% of it, but it's quite nice to see their presence, and they're done very beautifully. Especially one of the prominent ones is called the Qantas International Centre, which is a tower in the middle of Sydney, and it's very nice. Big trusses, big X's, very brutalist. But also not only on the side of it being kind of just a brutalist country or a brutalist city, sorry. Sydney City itself is also, or has a lot of projects in it that are designed by modern architects and famous architects. For example, John Ottson with the Opera House, the famous Opera House. You have oh yes, so next to the UTS building, there's a building there called One Central Plaza, I think. One Central Park, and that's designed by Jean Nouvel, so prominent architects. That new area, there's a new area here that I mentioned earlier, which is Barangaroo. In there, there's a project called the Three International Towers, which is done by Richard Rogers as well, a very famous architect. There's a Zaha Hadid building as well, Kengo Kuma, Kenzo Tangi, like a lot of new architects that are kind of the pioneers of their fields, or like very accomplished architects coming to design here in Sydney. And it's also nice to see that, because just looking at it from an architecture or an architect's point of view or an architecture student's point of view, it's always nice and important to be able to see projects, pioneer projects of these people, because seeing a photo of a building is something, but then seeing the building in reality and understanding how you fit in the scale, and then it's different. And that's also kind of what Sydney City is good at, is that it constantly kind of provides scale, but it's not too overpowering. But yeah, as I think as an architecture student myself and now an architect, Sydney City is a city that I really like. And like I said, it's just, I often do this thing. So sometimes when I have a long day at work, what I tend to do is I get down from my office and I rent one of these bikes. And so they're usually called Lime bikes or something like that. And I rent one of those, and then I use it all the way from work, and I get to the Royal Botanical kind of garden at the back end of it. I drive the bike in there, just feel the kind of closure, the like all of a sudden the noise is gone. And then there's a point in that garden where you can get to by bike or by car. You can also walk there, but it's quite far. But it's called Mrs. Macquarie's Chair. And it's imagine like you're kind of seeing the opera house but from a distance. So it's a point in the coast, and I'd recommend that whoever hasn't seen it to take a look at it. Just it's called Mrs. Macquarie's Chair. And for anyone that's listening to this that lives here in Sydney, I would recommend that you go there at around sunset, and you'll see the opera house in the foreground. You'll have, first of all, there's the water, then the opera house in the foreground, the harbor bridge in the background, and then behind that is the sun coming down, and it's usually so nice and so beautiful. And that's also one of the things that kind of makes Sydney stand out, is being able to witness this beautiful sunset go down on the water, and having those two elements, the opera house and the harbor bridge, there to complement the scene. It just makes it so nice. And I do truly believe that Sydney is one of the most beautiful cities. And as I say this right now, I'm, like I said earlier, I'm walking through Hyde Park, and it's just a refreshing day. The way I put it is that Sydney City is one of the best cities, to go spend a day at. So like, if I wanted to advise someone to come see Sydney City, maybe go for a sunny day, an overcast day, jump on the train, get off, and then walk around, do some stuff, do some shopping, go have a nice meal, and then enjoy a breakaway space like Hyde Park or the Royal Botanical Gardens, and maybe rent a bike as well and just go for a little trip. بس مع هذا that'll be the end of today's episode. I hope you guys I hope you guys enjoyed this, and let me know what you guys think about changing location. Was it something that enhanced the experience of walking with Brian, or would you rather we stay to the same spot that we usually walk at? But for now, حبكم كلكم وشكرا وهيك.